Hello and welcome to today's webinar about parametric symbols in UniversalPlantViewer, Part 2. My name is Daniel Dulinski. I'm the lead business process architect with CA Experts. So this webinar will take about 20 minutes. I will show you the software about 15 minutes, and afterwards we will have a session of 5 minutes for questions and answers. So you might ask yourself why this is Part 2 if you missed perhaps Part 1. So we had a webinar last year about the same time of the year about the same topic. And so this is not an update presentation. Today we will focus more on the symbol creation. So we will send you a recording of this video afterwards, so you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the webinar from last year if you are more interested in placing the symbols in UniversalPlantViewer. And there are also some videos around about 3D Symbol Designer on how to create the 3D symbols. The prerequisites to do these parametric symbols and use them in UniversalPlantViewer is that you have activated the sketching in UniversalPlantViewer, and you need 3D Symbol Designer to create the 3D symbols. So originally we have developed 3D Symbol Designer as a tool to create the 3D symbols for Intergraph Smart 3D, but you can reuse them or create new ones just for UniversalPlantViewer. So let's start with a live demo. Let's just have a look at our UniversalPlantViewer. So that's the tool here. And I've already opened up a sketch animation to show you how the animated parametric symbols are working. So of course you can also just place them without an animation. But as you can see down here, we have a sketch animation open. So I can just pull this and I get this animation of a crane picking up the tank and putting it down here. And I can just move this backwards. So it's really an animation. So let's have a look at this object over here, because that's a parametric symbol. As soon as I click on the symbol, you can see we get these white bubbles called handles, and they allow me to modify the symbol. So for example, I can use this one here, which is an angular handle, to move the crane up and down. And I can then use this one here to move it in this direction. I can use this bubble for moving these 4 parts here of the crane. And as you can see, it's limited. So I'm not allowed to move the bubble farther from the middle of the crane than this. So here we have a limit. We will have a look on these handles afterwards in 3D Symbol Designer. But that's just to show you what can be done using 3D Symbol Designer. You can create these symbols, and then you can use them in the animation tool in UPV to create an animation, or you just place them in a sketch to show your colleagues, for example, that a tank is missing or other items. We have already prepared a catalog with some standard symbols. So for example, here in architecture, in the catalog area, we can place, for example, a wall. So let's zoom in a little bit. Here you can see it's a wall where we have a window. So I can move the window around, can resize it. I can resize the wall. And as you can see, it's really live updated. I just pick the handle and I can move this around. Just as one example. Or for example, let's go to structural. Here I can place scaffolding with gate. So that's placed like this. Again, let's zoom in a little bit. And with this handle, I can just change the length of the scaffolding. Here I can modify the gate and move it around. And I can also change the height. Again, this is a 3D Symbol Designer symbol with some handles attached to it. I can also have, for example, a ladder. So here it's just a standard ladder you might have in your household. And if I change the height, you see I get the cage here on top, and I can even change the size here using this handle. Or, for example, a staircase. So let's zoom in again. So here you can see I can move this up and down and really reshape this so I have some stairs. So it's not just for these type of objects. I can also use things like transportation. So that's where we have seen the crane already. So we have a set of cranes, but also lorries, for example, or a tower crane. Even a Zeppelin is in here. So just place the tower crane. And again, as you can see, the shape is resizing. So how can you create these type of symbols? And that's what I like to focus on during the next couple of minutes. So you just need to have 3D Symbol Designer, and you can have a look at the symbols that come with UniversalPlantViewer already when you open them up in the demo version of 3D Symbol Designer. You can't modify them, but you can have a look on the files, how they are working internally. So there are a lot of videos online about the basic functionality of 3D Symbol Designer. So it's a tool to create parametric items. But today I will just show you how you could create something for a UniversalPlantViewer that is parametric and has some handles. So let's assume you want to just place a sphere and a handle to it to resize the sphere. So here I press this button, which allows me to add a sphere to my tree over here. So we have buttons to create objects in this area. The created items show up over here in the logical structure of our symbol. And down here we have a list of variants. So here it's just a sphere, and I add one parameter to define the diameter of the sphere and another variant down here to this list. So let's call the first one sphere A and the next one sphere B. So now we've got two variants, and the first one would have, let's say, 1000 millimeters, and the second variant 1500 millimeters. And I will just rename the parameter so that gets a new name, our diameter, which I can use to modify the size of the sphere. So I will just drag and drop the diameter in here. And now this primitive, this graphical primitive, is dependent on the input parameter. When I select the first row, it copies the 1000 millimeters up to this parameter, which is used in here. So we have the 1 meter in diameter. When I select the second row, it's copying the 1500 millimeters over here, and we have a diameter of 1 meter and 50. So that's the standard procedure on how to build the symbols. And for Smart 3D, you would add a Smart 3D mapping down here. Now let's add a mapping for UniversalPlantViewer. So I just input UniversalPlantViewer. And as you can see, we get a yellow highlight. So that's now a mapping row. And I can map this to a parameter, for example, sphere / diameter could be the name of the diameter in UPV. And it's working for both exports. So the UniversalPlantViewer export would be ignored for Smart 3D, and Smart 3D would be ignored for UniversalPlantViewer. So it's really a universal symbol that we are creating in here. Now we have a symbol that is dependent on these two input parameters for the diameter. So we have the two variants. Now the next step is, and that's what I would like to show you today, it's about these two buttons up here. So we have one button to place an angular handle and one to place a linear handle. So let's push this button here. So this adds a node called linear handle over here, and we have this length node. And now the row users parameter is complaining that there is no parameter 1. So we want, of course, to modify the part diameter using this handle. So I just input par diameter in here. So this handle will now modify the diameter. And let's go to the wireframe view so we can see the handle here in form of this red arrow. So you can see that we have a length of 1 meter and we have the diameter of 1 meter. So ideally, I would like to place the handle here. So the white button, bubble should be here. And it's always here on the top of the arrow. So I will just move this arrow to the left by minus par diameter divided by 2. And now it's placed like this. So in UPV, we will get a handle here at this area of the sphere. And when I move this bubble in UPV, it will resize the sphere. Now we have some additional items here, for example, maximum and minimum. That allows me to define the range where I can move the bubble. So when you remember the example with the crane at the beginning, I was only able to move some bubbles in a certain range. And that's what's happening here. I can define a minimum and a maximum value for this. So let's, for example, define the minimum diameter of the sphere as 0.5 meters and the maximum as 3 meters, just as an example. So now when I zoom out a little bit, you can see we have this disk over here rendered in red, and the disk down here also rendered in red. This one is at 0.5 meter, and the other one at 3 meters from the origin of the arrow. So when I select the other variant, you can see it's also showing me the minimum value of 500 millimeters and the maximum value of 3 meters. So when I add a new variant, I can just test the maximum size. So let's use the 3000 in here. Now you can see that here at the top of the arrow, we have this red circle, which is the maximum value. And I'm only allowed to move the bubble in UPV in this range. So basically that's the workflow, and it's the same for the other type of handles. So it's this one here called angular handle, which we can use to modify angles. So in this case, again, we will use a parameter that we can modify. And we can define a minimum and a maximum angle. And then we can rotate and translate this new item here so that it allows us to create an angular handle in UPV. So let's just have a look at this type of angles again, handles again. So I will just go to equipment, cabinet, and place it down here. And here we see how the angular handles are working. So we have a minimum value of 0 degrees, and we have a maximum value of 180. And this allows me to open and close the cabinet, and same, of course, for the other side. So quite simple. It's just modifying 2 parameters in a 3D Symbol Designer symbol that are used to define the rotation angles of the doors. And that's it. And here we have a linear handle to resize the shape so we can make it bigger or smaller. So that's it regarding these handles in a 3D Symbol Designer. We thought it would be a good addendum to the last video where we just showed how to place the objects, but we didn't go into the details of creating the symbols in 3D Symbol Designer. So if you have already done a lot of 3D Symbol Designer, and we have a lot of customers who already created thousands of 3D Symbol Designer symbols, it's quite easy to enhance them in a way so they are still working when you export them to Smart 3D, but you can reuse them for the usage here in the sketching mode of Universal Plant Viewer.